Hi. I've been trying to think about how to describe how it feels to be a Jewish critic of Israel and a Jewish critic of this war and of Israel's military escalation in Lebanon in this moment when so many Jewish Israelis and so many Jews around the world are kind of so giddy about Israel's series of kind of apparent military successes culminating in the assassination of Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah. And it reminds me a little bit of what it was like to try to be a critic of US policy after 9/11. Not that I did, frankly, that good a job of it back then, to be fair, but what it was like for those people who really were trying, because there's this sense in this moment of kind of profound nationalist kind of giddiness, enthusiasm, and to be opposed to it, to criticize it, creates this almost instinctive feeling a lot of people that you don't want your side, quote unquote, to win. It's almost like it's like watching a football game and your team has just sacked the quarterback and slammed the other guys to the ground and everybody's cheering and they're so thrilled and you're saying, well, gosh, that was really violent. I think you might have injured that guy. Have you thought about the consequences of this play and of the game for the brain injuries that are going to endure? And this is not only going to affect the other side, it's going to affect our team as well. And it trying to inject a kind of universalistic framework at a moment of such nationalist passions, it almost seems like designed to make you really, really unpopular. But I still believe very strongly that nothing good will come of this, not just for Lebanese people, but for Israelis as well. I mean, I understand that Israelis, like Americans after 9/11, still feel this keen sense of humiliation, which they want to overcome, and they're overcoming it with this very, very potent military they have. And I also understand that Israelis have this very real problem, which is that Israelis were forced from the north of the country after October 7th. And the Israeli government, any Israeli government, would feel the necessity to return those people to the north. But if you stand back from the kind of jingoistic, kind of visceral sense of, oh, we got them. Look how tough we are. Look how tough that Israel is. Look how tough the Jews are. And actually try to think strategically, I think you immediately run into huge kinds of problems, in addition to the very serious moral problems of killing all of these innocent people, right? And it reminds me of a tweet that Iyad el-Baghdadi, the Palestinian commentator, that he wrote on October 17th. He said, the Israelis are masters at winning tactically while losing strategically. So let's try to think about this strategically, right? Israel's problem is that it wants to return these Israelis to the north of the country. These Israelis in the north say, we're not going to live in these communities in the north of the country if Hezbollah is right on our border, because we fear that Hezbollah will do what Hamas did in the south on October 7th. So the only way that you're going to get those people back on the border is, according to the logic that I hear from a lot of people in Israel, is if Hezbollah is not on the border. This is why some Israeli kind of hawks and Israeli centrists say it's not enough to get a ceasefire in Gaza and then get a ceasefire with Hezbollah, because even if Hezbollah stops firing, it's still going to be there on the border. And after October 7th, Israelis are never going to feel safe in the north of the country with Hezbollah right on their border. I mean, I don't think Lebanese have ever particularly felt safe with Israel on the other side of the border, but putting that aside, right? But based on this logic, right, that people can only return to the north if Hezbollah is not on the border, that means someone has to secure the border and keep Hezbollah off of it. Because even though Hezbollah has been dealt a very serious military blow, they haven't ceased. No one thinks they're going to cease to exist, right? So who is going to keep them off of that border? Certainly, Israelis don't believe the UN could do it. The Lebanese army doesn't have the capacity to do it, right? So it seems to me the only logical kind of extension of this policy that Israel has now is that Israel has to go in and occupy a buffer zone in southern Lebanon, so its troops keep Hezbollah off, far away from the Israeli border, so that Israelis feel comfortable going back and living there again, right? But if you think about, there's a reason that Israel withdrew from its occupations of southern Lebanon, right? Because once your soldiers are in Lebanon, occupying southern Lebanon, sooner or later, it seems very, very likely people are going to start shooting at them. And the Israelis are going to start taking casualties in southern Lebanon. You were going beyond just occupying the Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza. Now you're going to be occupying parts of Lebanon as well. And you don't think that that's going to be the beginning of sooner or later of some kind of quagmire in which you're facing an insurgency that can bleed you for a long time to come? What is the answer to that problem? I don't hear anyone answering that strategic problem as they kind of delight in this tactical military victory. Beyond that, what do people think the consequences of this are going to be on Iran, right? Again, the Israelis seem really emboldened at the fact that Iran seems too terrified to basically really retaliate in a serious way, right? I mean, the irony is that people in Washington are constantly warning about America pursuing a strategy of appeasement or Israel pursuing a strategy of appeasement. The country that's been pursuing a strategy of appeasement has basically been Iran. They've been being punched in the nose again and again and have done very little to respond because they're clearly feel they're outmatched in a war against Israel. But how does Israel think Iran is going to respond to this? They think they're going to disband the regime? They think they're going to cut their ties with Hezbollah and their other regional proxies, which are the thing that give them some degree of deterrence? Seems much more likely that Iran will go even more aggressively to try to get a nuclear weapon, right? Because if you lack deterrence, if you feel extremely threatened, if you can't combat Israel in a conventional fight, then the lesson of North Korea certainly is that you need nukes because that's the thing that will preserve your regime and prevent Israel from launching an attack and America from launching an attack. And that's what the Iranian regime cares most about, regime self-preservation. So you're only, it seems to me, increasing the chances that Iran is basically going to go full scale ahead towards getting a nuclear bomb and testing it and putting on nuclear missiles so they can protect themselves. So how well will this have been seen to work out then? In addition to that, while everyone was focusing on the news about Nasrallah, Moody's, the credit rating agency, just downgraded Israel's economy in a very significant way. And Israel is facing very, very serious economic challenges as a result of this war and the growing international economic isolation that it's facing, right? These are real long-term strategic threats to Israel that I don't think Israel has any chance of solving through this kind of military high-tech wizardry. And then the last point is ultimately just that it's not realistic, putting aside moral, it's just not fundamentally realistic to think that you can perpetually operate in a world in which you give yourself the right to act with impunity and think that others are not going to do the same thing to you, right? There are, of course, a lot of people in Lebanon who really didn't like Hezbollah and Hassan Nasrallah, and for good reason, right? Nasrallah and Hezbollah has a lot of blood on their hands of a lot of different people, including a lot of Syrians, by the way, and many people in Lebanon recognize that, right? But imagine how the Israelis who hate Benjamin Netanyahu, and there are many of them, would feel if someone assassinated Benjamin Netanyahu and blew up the building that he was living in, right? Now, one might say, how dare you compare Netanyahu and Nasrallah? Well, obviously, they're different in a lot of ways, but let's remember, the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court, right, has said that he wants a warrant for Benjamin Netanyahu's arrest. So when we think about Netanyahu as being an international war criminal, that's not just something that kind of some left-wing fantasist came up with. This is the International Criminal Court, which the Biden administration actually thought was really great when it was going after the Russians, right? They want a warrant for Netanyahu. So imagine if some other power had done to Netanyahu what Israel has now done to Hassan Nasrallah. And I think Israelis and Americans have for a very long time gotten into this mindset that basically there's one law for everybody else and another law for us, right? And morally, that's fundamentally, in my mind, profoundly problematic, given that human beings are human beings and no human beings deserve to are so angelic that they can be trusted to not have to proceed along the terms of international law. But beyond that, the more you destroy international law, the more you create these precedents that powerful countries can do whatever they want, the more vulnerable you become when some other country gains the power and the chutzpah to start doing to you what you've been doing to them, right? And this is the world that America helped to start to produce when we invaded Iraq in violation of international law in 2003. And this is the world that Israel is now creating with all of these attacks in foreign countries. And there is, we in America say, what comes around goes around. In Hebrew, the phrase, from Jewish texts is midah keneged midah, right? That you will suffer in the way that you have brought suffering onto other people. I dread that prospect. I really do dread that prospect. But this is the world, it seems to me, that these Israeli actions are taking us towards. They're taking us to a world that is more savage, more dangerous, more lawless. And although the current victims are people in Lebanon who are suffering massively, ultimately, I believe that the victims of this environment that Israel is creating will be Israeli Jews themselves, in addition to people in the rest of the Middle East. And that's why I'm sorry, I can't get on this nationalist kind of jingoistic chest thumping campaign. I've just seen too many times that this ends in tears.